Hello and welcome back, it's Shrike here with another D&D video, and today we're going to look at skyships and how to use them in Dungeons & Dragons. So I was having a look for Explorer's Guide to Wildemount and I noticed this little insert here. As far as I could find, this is the first time in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons they have started to actually stat out a skyship. That, coupled with the fact that you see a nautiloid in the opening sequence of Baldur's Gate 3, made me think, what is the future of skyships in Dungeons & Dragons? But before we get onto that, I upload Dungeons & Dragons content here on YouTube every Monday and Thursday, so please do subscribe and remember to ding the notification bell which is just next to it so you get notified when I upload more videos. So let's kick off this video by talking about what a skyship is, and in its simplest form it is a ship that is in the sky. It's sort of like a medieval fantasy version of the aeroplanes and helicopters that we have in our world now. So they're flying vessels, but the one biggest difference is that they use magic usually. And another pretty big difference that depends on the world that you're playing in is that skyships can also go into space if you want them to. There's a whole D&D campaign called Spelljammer, which is about airships and other space vessels in outer space. It's basically Dungeons meets sci-fi in space. This video is not going to go into Spelljammer too much, but if you would like to see me do a video about Spelljammer, let me know and I can sort something out in the future. So now you understand what a skyship is, hopefully, is a ship that is in the sky. Let's talk about how you can actually use them in your world. So when you're going to use skyships in your game, the first thing you need to decide is how common they are. Are they going to be used just by nobles and really rich people, or are they actually just a normal mode of transportation? If your campaign setting has sky cities or something like that where there's civilizations that are actually on a floating rock, maybe it's actually quite common for them to have to use airships to get from one rock to the other or back down to the ground level. And then when you've decided how common they're going to be, the next step would be decide how they're going to dock. Are they just going to dock at normal docks at the side of the sea, or do they need special air style docks, however you want that to look? And then when you have those two things decided, you should be able to work out how many docks you need in your world. In the world of Exandria, where that snippet came from, there's actually only one dock on the continent of Wildemount, so it's pretty rare, but there are still people that have skyships. But if you decided you wanted them much more common, maybe every city or maybe even towns have some sort of skyship dock in their place so you can dock your skyships. Now you're sort of starting to see how a skyship fits into your civilization. Let's talk about how they're made and how they're flown. So to talk about how they're made, you sort of have to decide how they actually fly in the first place. So in the world of Exandria, there are enchanted crystals, and there's 3 of them on each ship, and they're how their ships actually fly. But if you want your airships to be a bit more mechanical and have wings, maybe there's some trapped air elementals that are constantly blowing at the wings to make them flap and to get the airships off the ground and up into the sky. Both of these style of ships are pretty hard to make, so you're probably going to need the most skilled artisans in the lands to make them. And if you're going the enchanted crystal routes, maybe the crystals are actually really hard to come by and really hard to mine, which is a little bit more of a barrier to making them. So there's 2 ideas for you, but you can of course come up with more on your own. And then now let's talk about how they're actually flown. So I like the idea, and this is what I do in my game, that you need wizards to expend spell slots into these enchanted crystals to get them to continue to flow. So the way I do it is every hour of travel, a spellcaster has to expend a spell slot into each of the crystals. So a first level spell slot would be 1 hour, second level 2 hour, etc, etc. But because there's 3 crystals on the skyship, it's actually quite a lot of resources that need to go into these to keep it going. So it's unlikely that your party is going to be one of these spellcasters, so they might actually have to hire someone else to come on board and just do that as their job. How they're maneuvered is also up to you. I also make it that spellcasters have like a control panel where they can put their hands on and then maneuver it in those style of ships. But if it's the more mechanical ones, then maybe there's a big rig of rudders and other stuff that actually makes it move the way that you need it to move. Now let's talk about what the skyships are actually used for. In my game, I only use them for transport, and that's it. So transport of cargo and transport of people. But there is the opportunity for them to be part of the military. Maybe they drop fireballs from underneath, or they have scorching ray style guns on the sides that shoot down below. You could use them like that as well. While we're talking about weapons, we should also talk about the aerial combat, because there are other creatures in the sky. Maybe there's dragons and harpies and stuff like that might attack the ship. In my game, I've opted to not give them cannons, because if you miss, then that cannonball is going down to the ground and causing probably quite a lot of damage. So I have what I call arcane turrets, and they basically just fire scorching ray out of them. But if you wanted to add ballistas or something else like that, then go ahead. If you want to actually stat out your airships, what I would suggest you do is go to the Ghost of Saltmarsh book and get the stats for the actual ships which are on the water, and then just altering them a little bit. The biggest change, of course, is the fact that they're in the sky, so if they get damaged enough, they might start plummeting back down to the ground. So this here is the stats for the galley out of Ghost of Saltmarsh. What I would change here is where it says movement sails, I would change that to movement crystals. And next to the hit points where it says minus 10 foot speed per 25 damage taken, I'd add a bit to that if it gets to 0 hit points, that's when the ship starts to plummet. I would also take out where it says about movement oars out of this, because obviously you can't use oars in the sky, it just doesn't work. But using these stats as your sort of base and then just making changes is more than enough to actually make your Skyship stats. You can also use the ships in combat section of that book and just change it so that it makes sense for the air. Outside of combat, there is another complication which could be quite common in your game, which is weather. Just like in the real world, it's actually quite hard to get a flying vessel through a storm. So if it's trying to go through a storm, maybe there are some chances for it to get damaged along the way. Or maybe every single airship has to have a druid that can control the weather to make sure that that doesn't happen. But using weather can really make it feel dangerous when your players are in the sky. If you want to see how to use skyships in your game, the second season of High Rollers has them in quite a bit, and it actually starts with a skyship crash, so if that sounds like a good start to a campaign for you, go and watch that and get some inspiration. Hopefully this video has given you some good inspiration of how to use skyships in your game. If it has, please do give it a like. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well if you want to see more content like this. I upload every Monday and Thursday, so make sure to subscribe. But until next time, happy gaming.